Haven't done my taxes, I'm too turned.
All right, guys, so I think we're going to start now. So as people are going to join, we'll let them in. But hello, everyone. I'm Akhil Bansal. I am a CPA. Thank you so much for joining this, webinar. And today we're going to discuss everything about taxes. We'll discuss, 1040s, 1040 NRs. We'll discuss like what do you need to file if you're a resident, non-resident. It's almost time to file your taxes. The due date or the deadline this year is April 18th. So it's usually April 15th, but this year it falls either on a holiday or a weekend. So it's the next business day, which is April 18th. So that's the deadline. You might already have documents coming in like your W-2s, 1099s, if you were on CPT, OPT, internships, working on campus. So you must have like all of these documents coming in because for employers, whoever employed you, for them, the deadline to provide you those documents is usually January 31st. So if you haven't already received those, you'll be probably receiving them in the next week or two. So all of those documents should just come in, and after that, you should be all set to file your taxes. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do this webinar was, first of all, obviously the tax season's coming up and you got to file your taxes. But the most important reason is there's not a lot of guidance for international students. There's not a lot of people there's really no such guidance for, 1040 NRs and people who are on H1Bs and you're just coming into the country. I spoke to like one of you guys. And it's only been 4 months for some of you guys who came here, and it's a new subject, and and you coming to a new country, it's so hard for you to navigate through the tax laws and everything in this country. And this is why I wanted to do this in the first place, so I can help students like you, people who are non-residents, people who are on F1 visa, J1 visa. We're going to cover a couple other visas as well. You'll probably be transferring from F1 to H1B. So there's all of these things, and that will determine what kind of tax returns you have to file. So let's. I'm gonna try to make this fun. I'm gonna try to make taxes fun, which is a pretty hard thing to do. But yeah, let's dive right into this. Couple of things. If you have any questions, just type them in the chat box, and I'll try to address most of those questions in the end after the presentation's done. So hopefully I'm able to cover most of those things like in the presentation. So if I'm not, if there are any particular situations, like we'll discuss all of those questions, after the call. So let's dive right into this. And sorry, there are a lot of people joining in right now. So we are gonna, I'm sorry. So our topics for discussion today, we're going to be discussing the 1040 versus 1040 NR. What are your filing requirements? Do you even need to file a tax return? Is it okay if you don't file a tax return? What are some of the deductions and credits that are available to you? Stimulus money. We'll talk a little bit about that. That's going to be the hot topic, I guess. Some of you guys might have received stimulus checks last year. There might be more stimulus checks coming in the future. So we'll discuss a little bit about that. Social Security and Medicare taxes, common tax forms. We just covered W-2s, 1099. So you might be receiving all of those. And then there's, we'll talk a little bit about the amendments, IRS notices as well. And then last but not the least, if you should use TurboTax, Sprintax, or if you want to hire an expert, we'll discuss all of those, like pros and cons of almost everything. So let's get started. And so a little bit about myself. So I am a CPA, certified public accountant. I'm licensed from California. And guess what? I went to Northeastern University myself. I did my bachelor's in accounting and master's in accounting, concentration in taxation, both from Northeastern University. So I am a double Husky, and go Huskies. If there's anyone here who is not from Northeastern, any other school in Boston, just wanted to put it out there. Northeastern is the best school ever. So go Huskies. Anyways, so yeah, that's my education background. A little bit about my experience. Yeah, we have chats coming in. Go Huskies! Proud of you guys. That's the spirit. And a little bit about my experience. I worked for PwC Boston when I was in Boston. So I worked in asset management and funds auditing. I also worked in individual and corporate taxation, and eventually moved to PwC in LA, Los Angeles, and worked in international taxation. So now I've tried to combine all of those things, and I'm running my own US tax and accounting firm. It's called USA Tax Gurus LLC. And I'm doing all sorts of taxation. So individual taxation, business taxation. If you own a LLC, C corporation in the US. So if you're interested in that stuff, we can obviously talk about that also off the call, off the meeting. And other things that we offer, we do bookkeeping and also US company formation. So I know there's a lot of young talent in this webinar, and some of you might be business majors or have business ideas, and if you ever want to pursue a business venture in the US, and you're thinking of opening a LLC or a corporation or some sort of a startup, there are possibilities. We usually work with the lawyers and the legal side of it, because you have some restrictions on F1 student visa, but it's not impossible. People come from all the countries and start businesses in the US. So it's not a problem at all. There are ways you can deal with that. But today we're going to cover individual taxation, 1040 NR, and we'll dive into that now. So just we'll talk about 1040 NRs, and yeah, let's do that. So the first topic is, should we be filing a 1040 or a 1040 NR? So let's make it simple. 1040 is for US tax residents. Who is a US tax resident? Anyone who is a US citizen, a US green card holder, or someone who meets the substantial presence test. And substantial presence test is basically if you're in the country for more than 183 days. But there is a small look back rule where they also consider like the years before that. So there's a 3-year look back rule. So they'll look at the last 3 years to determine. But for this presentation, let's just assume we're talking about if you were in the country in the past year for more than 6 months. So we'll keep it super simple. So 183 days is 6 months. So anyone who's a US citizen, US green card holder, or anyone who has been in the US for more than 6 months in the previous year, he is a tax resident, he needs to file a 1040. But there's a special note at the bottom of the slide. It says SPT doesn't apply to F1 students for the first 5 years of their stay in the US. So there is an exception. There is this special rule that says that students on F1 students who are in the US, and if they haven't been in the US for more than 5 years, those first 5 years are basically, they don't count towards that substantial presence test calculation. So you don't look at that. So the only other option that's left is 1040 NR, right? So 1040 NR is basically, all the non-residents file these, and F1 students for the first 5 years, it doesn't matter if you're in the US for one single day or more than 365 days. 365 days. Sorry about that. But the first 5 years, you're going to be considered a F1 student for federal tax purposes. Similarly, anyone who's on a J1 visa, the first 2 years, you're going to be on a 1040 NR. And there are, if you're on any other visa, if you're on H1B and whatnot, and if you were in the US for less than 6 months, then you'll be a tax non-resident. So to keep it simple, if you're resident, you're filing a 1040. If you're a non-resident, you'll basically be filing a 1040 NR. So hopefully that clears out what you guys what you guys will be doing. So if you're on F1 visa and it's the first 5 years, just 1040 NR. We're gonna dive into. I know with I know a lot of you guys might be from India, and India, we have different calendar year and different assessment year and all that stuff where the year ends on March 31st. And, you have to file the return from April 1st all the way through March 31st. In the US, we don't have that sort of thing. It's simple, it's clean. Tax year means calendar year. So if I'm talking about 2020 return, it means all the income that you've earned from Jan 1, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. If I'm talking about 2021 return, if I'm talking about 2021 calendar year, I'm talking about all the income that you've earned during 2021. So it's as simple as that. We don't talk about that, it's 2022. If I'm filing my 2021 return in 2022, I'm going to call it 2020. Nothing of that sort. So when I'm talking about 2021, so you'll be filing your 2021 taxes now. So basically all the income that you've earned during your previous year. So that's basically the calendar year / tax year. And then now, how do you calculate those first 5 years in the US? So say, for example, you entered the US on September 1st of 2019. So all the way from September to December 31st, that is going to be considered your first year. So it doesn't matter if you enter the US on September 1st or December 30th. If you are in the US on an F1 visa for a single day, that year, that is going to be considered your 1 year. So usually people come in during fall semesters to start their college and whatnot. So September 1 or December 30th, it doesn't matter. That entire year is going to be counted as your first year. And then your second year is going to be basically 2022 or 2020, and then 2021, 2022, 2023, and then 2024 is basically going to be your sixth year, where you'll start looking into filing a resident return, or you'll check your statuses and whatnot. So going forward, what happens when you change from a F1 to H1B? So this is gonna be very common amongst students because you're on a F1 visa, and you're probably gonna graduate soon, and then eventually you will be on OPT, right? And then your employer is gonna probably sponsor you. So there will be a time when you're changing your status from F1 to H1B. So in that case, for example, in the same previous example, if you entered the USA in 2019, graduated in 2020, and then in 2020 your employer sponsored, you got the visa, you got the lottery. In 2021, you're basically going to apply for H1B, and if you get it, you could be filing a 1040 NR or a 1040. It could be either of those two. And how it's determined is, again, you look at all of those.
Like a big snow dune.
Sorry, can people mute you?
Yeah, and half of.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just mute everyone, and we'll take questions in the end. If you have any questions, please just type it in the chat box. Sorry about that. So yeah, usually H1Bs start from October 1st, which means for that year, when you convert from F1 to H1B, your first 9 months you're still on F1, and then the last 3 months you're usually on H1B, and that doesn't trigger a resident return, because when you look at SPT, only those 3 months count towards that substantial presence test, and which is less than 183 days. So even during the year when you transfer from F1 to H1B, that year also you might be filing a 1040 NR, and that might be your last 1040 NR, because the next year when you're on H1B, you're not on F1, you're not considering that 5-year rule anymore. So when you're on H1B, for the full year, you'll be considered a resident alien for federal tax purposes. And at that point, you'll be filing a 1040. All the deductions and everything will open up for you as well. That's open to all the US citizens, US residents, and it'll be opening up for you as well. I think I annotated something here by mistake, so let me quickly erase that. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead. So let's talk about special rules here. So there's CPT, OPT. It doesn't matter if you're on CPT or OPT. At the end of the day, you're still under F1 visa class. Just a quick little example I'm going to show here again. So in this case, you might come on a F1 visa, a grad student who's going to graduate in 2 years. So year one, year two, maybe half of year three, you're on F1 visa. You're in school. Year three, you're graduating. But then after that, you're on OPT. And then say if you did a STEM major and you're going to do OPT of 3 years, right? So it's going to be 1 year of OPT plus 2 years of extension. So 2 years in school plus 3 years of OPT, you're still under the F1 rules. So you're still going to be considered a non-resident alien for federal tax purposes. You are going to be filing a 1040 NR. So it's the year when you change your visa status or you move into another degree program. We'll discuss that a little bit, but we're basically just looking at F1 visa. So if you can graduate, you can be on OPT and still be considered a non-resident. And then another special rule is for non-residents who might be married. So if you're a non-resident alien for federal tax purposes and you're married, the only option you have is married filing separate. I have single there, but that's just for non-residents can only basically file either a single return or married filing separate. So, and if you're married, that's the only option, married filing separate. So there could be, one of you who's on F1 visa and your spouse is going to come on F2 visa, right? So you're basically married, but you cannot file a married filing joint return because non-residents are not allowed to file a married filing joint return. So we're going to have to file two separate returns. So it's going to be married filing separate for F1 student, and then for the F2 spouse, it's again going to be married filing separate. But circumstances could change. One person could get H1B, or if you're married to, say, a resident, in that case, you might get to make some special elections and treat yourself as a resident and claim all the good deductions that every citizen resident in the US gets. So that's the special rule about married non-residents. Usually they're not allowed to file married filing joint. They're only allowed to file married filing separate. And the third special rule is second master's or another degree on F1 visa. So we have, I've had clients or I've had other students where they came in, did their undergrad, they were on F1 for 4 years, and then because they couldn't get H1B lottery, so they decided to get another degree just to stay in the US, get more CPT, get more experience, get another OPT, maybe in STEM, another 2 years of extension. So in that case, you might think that, hey, like I'm coming on a new F1 visa, so all of those rules, will start over, but they don't. So you actually only have 5 years on in total on F1 visa. So if you completed your undergrad in 4 years and you're coming back for a PhD in your 5th year on another F1 visa, guess what? You'll only have the first 5 years. So undergrad plus 1 year of PhD, where you'll be considered a non-resident for the tax purposes. And then after that, you will basically be considered a resident alien. So after the 5 years, even if you're on F1, you could basically be a resident alien. And the good part is when you're a resident alien, you can claim tuition credits, you can claim American Opportunity Tax credits, all of that stuff, but not as a non-resident. So we're going to discuss a little bit about that as well, about the deductions and credits that are available to students. So who must file a tax return? If you have US sourced income, which means if you earned income in the US, so from employment, from salaries, from, if you're working under someone, and that amount exceeds 12,550, which is basically the standard deduction amount for this year. And this one applies for Indian students. So if your income is more than that, you definitely got to file a return. But if you are earning less than that, should you file? Yes, you absolutely should, because you can get a huge refund. So you know how you work at, say, on-campus jobs, right? So when you do, an employer has promised you like $20 an hour, but in the end, when you take a look at your paycheck, you only have like $16. So where did that $4 go? It basically went into taxes. But if you earned less than 12,550 for that entire year, then you shouldn't be paying any taxes, right? So now is the time when you can file that tax return, basically get that $4 back on that $20. And if you work multiple hours, that could amount to a huge, huge figure. So that could all be like a refund for you if you file your returns on time. So questions coming up. Will I share these slides later? Yes, I will. And is it annual income? Yes, it is. So whatever income that you've earned during the year, all of that is gonna be considered for this. So going forward, what are some of the common tax forms? So let's talk about the one that's in yellow first, like all the way in the bottom left corner. So W4, W9, I9, these are all the employment onboarding forms that you provide to your employers, or your employers, when you start a new employment, they'll have you sign these forms because it's just required for them to do that. So you're not gonna receive these back. I mean, you'll get a soft copy, sure, like after you, but this is not an income document that you'll receive at the year end. So these are just onboarding forms that people usually confuse their W-2s with and whatnot. But this is just something that you complete for your employer so they can withhold the right taxes for you. So as simple as that. So, but on the right, you'll see, the section in dark blue, W-2s, 1099 NECs, 1099 MISC. So W-2 is basically the salary income statement that you'll receive from your employer if you were a full-time employee for them, or I mean, if you were basically on their payroll. So that's when you'll get a W-2. If you're hired as a contractor, which might be the case in a few CPTs or OPTs, but hopefully you get proper approval from your DSO. If you're hired as a contractor, you have the proper approval from your DSO, and you can, I think, work on as a contractor as well. But double check with with the immigration attorneys or with your school's DSO. But usually, when you're hired as a contractor, you basically receive a 1099 NEC. And then 1099Bs are basically stocks, interest, dividends. This is a statement that you receive from your brokerage. So if you've opened a Robinhood account, Fidelity account, you're probably going to receive a 1099B if you bought and sold any shares during the year. It could be possible that you might not have sold anything, but there is still you might still earn interest and dividends on the stocks that you bought, right? So it doesn't matter if you sell something or not, you might actually end up receiving a 1099B because whatever you bought paid you interest and dividends, passive income. So that's 1099B. 1098T, T as in tuition, is basically a tuition statement. You'll get this from your university, but non-residents, unfortunately, you cannot claim tuition credits. So even if you get it, like, it won't really impact your taxes if you're an F1 student and if you're in the first 5 years of your stay in the US. So you're basically filing a non-resident return. So you might not be able to claim any tuition credits. So that's 1098T. And then 1099HC, this is a mass form. So not all the states will have this. I mean, this is a Massachusetts specific form. Mass requires their residents, I think non-residents as well, to have healthcare. And Northeastern luckily provides us with that, right? Like Blue Cross Blue Shield, I'm sure tons of you guys might be on Blue Cross Blue Shield. So you will hopefully soon receive a 1099 HC from your Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance company. And if you haven't, then give them a call. You have those insurance cards. They have a number on the back of it. And if you call them and tell them that you haven't received your 1099 HC, they will email it to you. So sometimes you change addresses. Last year you were living somewhere else, so that's why they have that address. Now you move to another place. There could be tons of reasons why these forms could be lost. So the easiest would be, if you don't receive these by mid-Feb, contact your employers, contact your brokerage, contact your university, contact the state. Call them, ask for these forms, and tell them that you need these for taxes. And if your address changed, just update the address. But that's another important thing. If you're in the US, make sure your address is always updated, because you're going to receive all these important documents. So for that purposes. So these are a couple of common tax forms that students usually receive. And now we'll dive a little bit into deductions and credits. My favorite topic. So standard deduction. I know a lot of people, you might have already heard about this. Non-residents usually do not get standard deduction, but students from India do. US and India has an amazing relationship. And they, out of all the countries in the world, they decided to partner up with India. I'm kidding. But US and India, they actually have a treaty. It's a US India tax treaty, article number 21, paragraph 2. You can look it up. And it will tell you that students from India are, allowed to get standard deduction. So that's a big thing for students from India, because if you're earning anything less than 12,550, you do not need to pay any taxes, no taxes at all. I mean, you still have to file the tax return to get that refund that we were talking about, but you don't have to pay any taxes to the government. So and if you've earned more than 12,000, which will be the case when you are on OPT, full-time, H1B. I mean, when you're on H1B, you're anyways a resident. But if you're on OPT and you're earning more than that, the first 12,550 is basically exempt. I mean, you can take a deduction. You don't have to pay taxes on that part. So if you're earning 60K, you're only going to be taxed on 48K. So that 47 450 to be accurate. But yeah, so that's basically standard deduction. Students from India are allowed that. Rent credit in Massachusetts. Massachusetts provides rent credits if you've lived in Mass, if you maintain a house here, or if you're if you paid rent out of your pocket. Massachusetts will provide you with $3,000 as a deduction. So that's another big one. In your tax application portals, if you're submitting tax information on TurboTax, Sprintax, or even on my portal, don't inflate your rent, because even if you paid like $12,000 in rent, or I mean like 100,000, $3,000 is the max deduction you can get. So do not inflate your expenses, because that could be a problem for you in the future in case you get audited. You'll have to show the receipts and everything, and you might not have that. And so there's no point in inflating your expenses, because I mean, at the end of the day, 3,000 is the max you're going to get. So if you've paid like only 5,500 say in rent, just write 5,500. Don't inflate your expenses. Tuition credits, like I said, you might not be, non-residents are not eligible for these, but we've discussed a case where you could be on F1 and you still could be resident. That's when you're on another F1 and you've been in the US for more than 5 years. So undergrad plus masters, so all of those kind of situations. So in that case, you will be eligible for tuition credits. And then recovery rebate credit, that's another big one. So $1,400, that's basically the stimulus money that came in last year. A lot of you guys might have received it, or you might have questions regarding if you are going to receive any more stimulus money, and if you should have this in the first place. Unfortunately, it's not available for non-residents, and hate to break it to you, you might have to return it. And we'll dive into the stimulus part in a second. So, but these are some of the common like deductions and credits that are available to residents and non-residents. The yellow ones, they're definitely available for all the non-residents. The tuition credits and recovery rebate credit, they're not. So going forward, special topics. Social Security taxes and Medicare taxes exemption. We're going to discuss that, stimulus money, and then we're also going to discuss multi-state W-2s, and if you move to a new state and whatnot, and how do you tackle taxes with that. So Social Security and Medicare taxes exemption. So that's the first thing we're going to discuss. So like I said, you're exempt from Social Security and Medicare taxes. In short, we can call it FICA. So this is a screenshot from IRS website. The link is right below. I'm going to share this presentation. So definitely look it up. But this is a really good article and will tell you everything about non-resident taxation. So this is just a snippet from the link, but you should definitely visit this link. So I'm just going to read out the line that I've highlighted. It's saying basically any foreign students that are on F1, J1, non-immigrant status who've been in the US for less than 5 years are non-resident aliens and are exempt from Social Security and Medicare taxes. So the IRS website straight up tells you that you do not have to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes. So there's 4 kind of taxes in the US, right? Like there's federal taxes, Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes, and then state taxes. You might have city and local taxes as well. Massachusetts doesn't have, Massachusetts generally, you won't have this. So out of those 4, you don't have to pay Social Security and Medicare if you are a non-resident alien for federal tax purposes. So that's a good part about being non-resident. Okay, you don't get a couple of deductions, but guess what? IRS made it a little easier for you on this part where you don't have to pay an additional 7.5%. That's basically Social Security plus Medicare taxes. So this is FICA. A funny example that I want to share here. I bet everybody has watched Friends here. Friends season 2. Do you remember Rachel got her first paycheck and and then she's like, where did all this extra, like, who's this guy FICA who's taking all my money? Well, this is that guy FICA, and guess what? Non-residents don't have to pay that. So Rachel needs to pay FICA because she's a resident alien for federal tax purposes, but not you guys. Sorry to go off topic, but yeah, that's FICA, and you don't have to pay that. How can you check if employers have been withholding FICA taxes from your paychecks? Take a look at your paychecks. Also, if you receive a W-2, your W-2 is gonna look something like this. This is a W-2 from Northeastern University. They do a pretty good job at not withholding your Social Security and Medicare taxes just because there's so many international students, right? So if you look at box number 4 and 6, that's where it says Social Security taxes withheld, Medicare taxes withheld, right? So box 4 and box 6 should be empty when you're receiving your W-2. And I mean, you're gonna receive W-2 like after the year ends, right? So it's already too late. Not too late, I mean, but your employer has already withheld those taxes if box number 4 and 6 says an amount there. So at that point, you have a couple of options, and we're gonna discuss that. But when you start a new employment, when you are joining a job, make sure you complete your onboarding documents correctly. So what we discussed previously, the onboarding documents, the W-4, W-9, W-4, W-9, and I-9, like one of these forms, you'll have to file with your employer. So just make sure you file that correctly, and you tell your employer that you're a non-resident alien for federal tax purposes. Like that should be your first goal. And first thing you should be doing in any employment: CPT, internships, OPT, full-time jobs. If you're on OPT and you're in the first 5 years of F1, make sure your employer knows that you're a non-resident alien for federal tax purposes, and they shouldn't be withholding your Social Security and Medicare taxes. And if they say that that's not true, blah blah blah, you have this screenshot right here. You have the link right here. Send them the link. Tell them to talk to their CPA, their accountant, because you shouldn't be paying the Social Security and Medicare taxes. But if the year has ended and you're receiving this W-2, which says like your Social Security and Medicare taxes were withheld by your employer, there are a couple of things you can do. First, contact your employer, show them the above documentation, right? Ask them to issue you a corrected W-2C, which is basically a corrected W-2. So they've issued you a W-2, but then you're telling them that, hey, this is not correct. I don't have to pay Social Security and Medicare. So can you issue me a corrected W-2? So what they'll do is they'll basically issue you a new W-2. So if your W-2s have those amounts in there, this is the first step you should do. Contact your employer, tell them that, hey, like, you just got to know this, send them this link. You're not supposed to be paying Social, Medicare, and ask for a refund. Tell them that, just issue me a W-2C and give me a refund. Or what they will do is they can also adjust the amount. So box 4 and box 6, what they'll also do is they'll put those amounts in box 2. So what they're basically telling IRS is all that Social Security and Medicare that they withheld was actually not Social Security and Medicare. There was actually federal taxes. So that way we can basically claim that as a refund on your federal tax return. So now you just have more federal taxes that you've paid. And then when we file your income tax return, you basically get all of that money back. Say in this case, this guy made 43K, 4.3K. So 4,300, right? And so he's gonna get that entire $452 back if he files a tax return. The other thing is if the employer says, sorry, we can't do anything, and the forms are filed, we can't refund you that, then we can take other measures where, we'll apply for a special abatement with the IRS. It's called, I think, Form 843, if I'm not wrong. But yeah, that form is a separate form. It doesn't need to go with your tax return. It can go separately, like so after the busy season, or if you want to send it separately, it goes to a different address, not the one that where your return goes. So we can file that form request for the refund directly from the IRS, and in that form we basically say that our employers did not correctly withhold the taxes, so we're just requesting this back, and according to like blah 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 code section, we weren't supposed to pay this. So IRS will get back to you, but it can take months, could take more than a year, and that's what our experience has been with these kind of forms. IRS is on a huge backlog right now. It has 6 million unopened, unprocessed returns from 2019, 2020. So that's obviously their priority. These abatements, paper filings, it's gonna take a while for them to get back to these. And then now, I hope this situation is pretty clear. We don't have to pay FICA taxes or Social Security taxes. The next one is the third stimulus check, $1,400, that some of you might have got. Again, bad news here. Non-residents are not allowed to get Social Security, not allowed to get stimulus checks or this money. And again, screenshot from IRS, the link's right below. Talks about eligibility for the third stimulus check. It says you can only get this if you are a US citizen or a US resident alien for federal tax purposes. Which means if you're filing a 1040, if you're resident for federal tax purposes, the first slide that we discussed, right? So if you're not a resident, unfortunately, you cannot get the stimulus check. And to be eligible to get the third stimulus check, you would have to be a resident alien during 2021. So which means the last year, you should have been a resident alien. But if you were on F1 and if you've been in the US for less than 5 years, sorry, no stimulus for you. So why did you receive the stimulus in the first place? That is probably because either you guys have already filed using TurboTax. TurboTax does not support 1040 NRs. So do not use TurboTax ever. It does not do 1040 NRs. Or you've used, say, Credit Karma, some of the other websites which H&R block. Not everyone specializes in national taxation. Not everyone's a CPA. Somebody's just a normal preparer. So there are some complicated rules, and you'll go to H&R block and they won't even ask you the right question. They'll be like, give us your W-2, we'll file the return for you. They should be asking you what visa you're on, how many days you've been in the US. So not everyone specializes in this field. But yeah, sorry to go off topic. You're not allowed to get a stimulus check. And if you filed a resident return in the previous years, which means if you filed a resident return in 2018, 2019, or 2020, the stimulus checks were basically triggered because of those. So if you filed any of those returns in those years, I would highly, highly recommend that you file an amendment, basically a 1040X with the actual 1040 NR that you were supposed to file. So, and obviously, you'll have to return that stimulus money along with that. But the reason why I'm saying this, that you should file an amendment, is because obviously, nobody wants to give government extra money, but it could create a problem in the future when you apply for, say, H1B or green card or whatnot. Because at some point you're going to file right taxes, right? You're going to file correct taxes. If you've been filing resident taxes in the previous years, and now that you know that you have to file a non-resident return, and if I file a non-resident return right now for you, it's going to be a red flag, right? Like, you file resident returns, and how come someone just became a non-resident from resident? So like at that point, IRS is going to take a look at what's going on. They'll realize that, okay, they filed resident returns, we probably showed them stimulus money, let's ask for that back. And guess what? At that point, H1B processing is going on, and IRS sends you a notice that, hey, like, can you give us our stimulus money back? That way, H1B could be a problem. You might get a RFE, you might have to clear your tax balance and all that stuff. So might as well clear it out now that before you apply for citizenships, green cards, like in the future. This is why 1040X is important, and amendments are important. So that's basically stimulus money. And the next one we're gonna cover is working in multiple states. I mean, if you guys are on F1 visa, you should definitely explore US, and that means you should definitely be looking for employments in other states as well. Boston is cold as anything, and at some point you might want to visit some sunny states like California or some other states. So you might decide to work somewhere else. So if your employer is in Massachusetts, you've left that employer, now you're going to go to another state, work there. So this will complicate your tax situation just a little bit, because now the first employer is going to withhold Massachusetts taxes, another employer is going to withhold California taxes. You will come to your tax preparer at the end of the year with those two W-2s, right? And then we'll have to file basically 3 returns: a federal return, a Massachusetts return, and then also a California return, because you worked in multiple places. And sometimes what happens is, there's a couple of points to consider. I already covered the first one. The second one is state income apportionment. Sometimes what happens is, employers make mistakes, and they'll put if you're working in California, but you've given them your Massachusetts address, they'll start withholding your Massachusetts taxes. But actually you were living in California at that time, so you should be paying California taxes, right? So at the end of the year, you might not have paid a single penny in California, but you might have paid all the amount to Massachusetts, which is not right, because you earned something in California, so you got to pay some taxes in California. So that's basically what's called state income apportionment. You basically got to allocate your income between those different states, right? So if you're working in Massachusetts, pay taxes for that particular income in Massachusetts, and then the remaining amount, whatever you earned in California, needs to be paid there. So softwares usually do not do a pretty good job at that, because Sprintax, TurboTax, they won't tell you like how to do state income apportionment, because you just put in your W-2s, they'll file your returns. So that's one point to consider if you're going to be working in different states. And then you also got to avoid double taxation, right? Like, because say in that case where all the money was paid to Massachusetts, you want to get a refund from Massachusetts so you can pay your California taxes, right? You don't want to pay all the California taxes and then also not get anything back from Massachusetts. So that's another point to consider. So when you're working in multiple states, when you're moving from different states, when you're switching employers, when your employers do not have right addresses, this could be a huge problem. So one thing that you can do is make sure that your employers always have your correct address, which means when you're in Boston, you're living in Boston, call your HR department, tell them that you're in Boston. They should be withholding Massachusetts taxes. If you're in any other state, say California, when you land there, when you get a house there, when you have an apartment there, call your HR, tell them that your address has changed, and then the next paycheck onwards, they'll start withholding California taxes. And that will make it so much easier when we have to file your tax returns, because all we have to do is feed in your W-2s, your taxes are withheld correctly, and it's an easy game. So so that's basically working in multiple states. And now we'll discuss a little bit of problems that students face when they file with TurboTax and Sprintax. First of all, don't use TurboTax. They don't do 1040 NRs, so that's just a no-no. They're just not designed to handle non-resident aliens. So TurboTax is completely out of the picture. Second, if you're using Sprintax, which is a non-resident filing software, they do a pretty good job with simple returns. But again, some I've had clients where, I mean, they I think they a lot of times they do paper filing, so which means they'll prepare your returns, they'll send them to you, but then you'll have to print it, you'll have to sign it, you'll have to walk to the USPS office and then mail it to the IRS. And IRS has a huge backlog right now. 6.6 million individual returns are pending, 2.3 million amended returns are pending. Avoid paper filing at all cost, because returns could get lost in the mail, even though if you have some sort of tracking on it, that's fine. But like, try e-filing the returns, say with a paid preparer, with an expert. The benefit is, your returns get e-filed, they're more secure. Nobody else touches your return on the way to the IRS. So e-file if possible. Another problem that people have faced with Sprintax is, on my previous clients, is they don't know how to enter the data in Sprintax. It should be intuitive, but it's not actually, because people sometimes mess up how they enter data. That's why they don't get the right deductions. They sometimes miss the credits. There was no one to tell them that there's rent credits. There's no one to tell them that, hey, like students with foreign student loans can get interest deduction and whatnot. So that's another problem. There's no one to review. There's no tax advice. You're literally on your own. So and once you file your returns, if there's a problem with refund, there's no follow-ups. It's so hard to. You're basically just back online talking to an agent who doesn't know what's going on, and so that could be a problem. So that's just some of the problems that people face with, or students face with TurboTax and Sprintax. And a little bit of self-promotion here. Why hire an expert? Hiring an expert, obviously, your returns are gonna be more accurate. If a CPA is basically reviewing your returns or signing them off, we look at multiple things. We look at, if you worked in multiple states, if you traveled across borders, and if there's any other deductions that you qualify for. So obviously there's that. There's e-filing. Once we prepare the returns for our clients, we send them for review. They can electronically sign it. We electronically transmit it to the IRS and state, or any other expert or CPA or an e-filer for that matter. So you can get your returns e-filed. There's also gonna be, your refund time is gonna be much quicker than when you paper file the returns. So e-file to get quicker refunds, and then you can indicate your direct deposit and routing number on your tax return, so you can get a direct deposit into your account, so you don't have to wait for the paper check to come in, and even that could get lost, and you'll have to wait and call the IRS, and that's a whole another nightmare. So you don't want to get on a call with the IRS, because the waiting times are crazy. I mean, right now it's crazy. So quicker refund, personalized service. Obviously, like I said, no two people's tax situation is the same. So you have someone to discuss your situation with. You got to plan something that's going to happen in the hire someone, even for a competitive price. So that's why you could hire an expert. And then and a couple of other things that you should consider. You're going to graduate soon, right? Like you'll be if you're in grad program, 2 years after that, you're graduating, you're working for the best employers in the country. You're working for Amazon, Microsoft, or JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, big banks. So all of those will give you tons of investment options like IRAs, 401ks. You'll have multiple W2s. You might be traveling across different states. So your taxes are going to get a little more complicated, because I mean you're making more money. You'll have RSUs, you'll have, which is restricted stock options, ESOPs, employee stock option purchase plans. You might be investing in stocks if you're really earning a lot, and if you believe in if you're building passive income, you'll have rental properties and whatnot. So the higher the income, the more successful you are, the more tax planning opportunities you have. So at that point, definitely consult an expert rather than relying on a software to calculate your deductions for you, because it's not going to ask you the right questions. So consult an expert when you're doing that, and and once you become a resident alien, which is after your 5 years on F1, you'll have the option for claiming all the credits and deductions that open up for you, and they are the same credits and deductions that are available to residents, to U.S. citizens, to green card holders. So the same deductions open up for you even when you're on a visa. So say if you're on H1B, and then but the downside is once you become a resident, you'll have to do like foreign bank reporting and stuff if the balances in your, say, Indian accounts are over a certain threshold. So, you might have a foreign bank account reporting, um, requirement if your balances in, say, your foreign accounts is more than $10,000, which is almost 7.5 lakh rupees. And, you might have foreign income, you might have other assets in other countries. So you might have to report those, but you do get foreign tax credits. It's more like a reporting purpose for reporting purposes. So just like how in India taxes worldwide income, so does US. So when you become a resident in the US, you have to pay taxes on your worldwide income. So after you graduate, there's a lot of tax planning opportunities, and this is my portal this is my website. It's called USA Tax Gurus. So just log on to www.usataxgurus.com if you're interested in filing with us. Just go to the login page, click on login, and once you're there, sign in with Google. Make sure when you enter your application details, your country of citizenship is correct. So choose India there. We've discussed, when you might be on a different visa status. So like if you've changed your visa status during the year, if you've changed from F1 to H1B, select like I changed my visa status during that year. And then if you've been on F1 for the entire year, you can just choose F1. And then the bottom portion is basically what I was talking about when I was talking about multi-state returns. So if you've worked in more than one state, when it asks you like what US states you've worked in, make sure you enter both of those states and then explain your situation. So in this case, this guy has explained that, he worked and studied in Boston at Northeastern University until April. In May, he graduated, or in April, he graduated and then moved to California in May. So this gives me a good idea of when you were in Boston and how much taxes we need to pay in Boston or Massachusetts. And then after May, all the income that you've earned in California is in California. So it makes it so much easier. So you worked in 2 different states. Make sure you mention that in the portal. It will make jobs so much easier for us. And then other details, we've already covered this: student loan interest, rent payments, tuition expenses. For tuition expenses, if you're a non-resident alien and if you have a 1098T, it doesn't matter. Select no, because non-residents do not get tuition credits or deductions. But if you're a resident alien for federal tax purposes, definitely select yes, upload the 1098T, and we'll take care of it. And then this is an important question under tab 3, the other details, where it asks you like, have you been present in the US for any part more than 5 years? So if you've been in the US for less than 5 years, you basically select no. So what that will do is will basically trigger, it's a dynamic form. So it will trigger another tab, which will ask you your travel dates, because we need to mention those on your 1040 NR tax return. So just select no here if you've not been in the US for more than 5 years. And then under the foreign travel dates, like enter your first date that you entered in the US. So if you entered the US in 2019, so include that. And then underneath that, like all the way from, so we're going to look at the last 3 years of days, like we were saying, substantial presence test. Even though you are exempt, but we need to provide this information. So this guy, he entered the US on 8/26, and then all the way from 8/26 2019 to December 31st 2021, he was in the US. So if you look at all the way in the bottom left, that's where you'll see how many days he was present in the US. So just these couple of things, and then in the end, it will let you upload your tax documents. You can add your W-2s here. You can add your 1098 your interest forms and whatnot. And then it will ask you like what return you filed last year. So for example, this guy is a non-resident alien for federal tax purposes, but this guy filed a 1040 last year. So he should have filed a 1040 NR. So this is where, we go in and we take a look at all your documents and make sure, you're complying to everything. So we will make you a suggestion that, hey, like last year you filed a 1040 instead of a 1040 NR. So before we file this year's return, we'll actually recommend that, hey, like you should consider filing an amendment before you file the 1040 NR, because if you do, then you might, a notice might get triggered. You might get a notice saying that, hey, like what happened and blah, blah, blah. So you might need to provide some extra explanation. So, but this is a perfect example of, how, like, why you should hire an expert, because they'll look at your previous year returns, make sure everything's done right. And then this guy, it asks you for a US government ID. This guy doesn't have a US government ID, which is absolutely fine. But in case you do, if you have a state ID, if you have driving license, do upload it here, because that verifies your information with the IRS, especially when we are e-filing the returns. So they usually won't ask you any more questions regarding identity verification and whatnot. So sometimes it happens when people have to file their returns, and IRS sends them another notice saying that we need to check or verify your identity. So in that case, if you already have a state ID or a driving license, and if you don't, I mean, get one. That's super important, and like for tax purposes, for identity purposes, for tons of things in the US. So get a state ID. It's it barely costs anything, but it will save you from a lot of compliances and stuff. So just do that. I'm gonna answer a couple of questions now, and I'll read out a couple of. Okay, there's tons. So I'm gonna try to pick up some of the questions, and it's good that we have names here. So if you guys are still online, I'll be more than happy to answer those questions. So let's see. I'm gonna see if there's any interesting questions. I think I've covered a lot of those, because these initial questions were answered like later during the presentation. So I'm still scrolling. What time usually W-2 gets sent out? Employers are supposed to provide these to you by Jan 31st. So you should be getting these super soon. Sometimes they could be a little late. So, hopefully by early Feb, you should get these for sure. Like you should have all your employment documents by mid-Feb, mid-Feb, late Feb. What's a good resource to e-file 1040 NR? I don't know if Sprintax does all e-filing and whatnot, but if you hire a expert, if you go through us, or if you hire any other expert CPA, make sure they're e-file approved, and you could definitely e-file with them. Let's see. Do I need to pay tax if I don't have on-campus job? Well, I mean, if you don't have an on-campus job, I mean, you better be approved for that. You should either be on CPT or OPT if you're not doing an on-campus job. So make sure you're employed legally by any of your employers. Get permissions from DSO. Have them withhold the right taxes. And if you earn less than 12,550, you're gonna get all of that back. So might as well get the right approvals, do that, file the return, and not pay any taxes. So there's legal ways to not pay taxes, and so don't engage in unauthorized employment. That's what I would suggest. And how to file taxes if I don't have a social security number? Would the FICA deduction still be valid? I mean, if you don't have a social security number yet, I mean, you probably didn't. Because to work in the US, you need a social security number. As simple as that. If you don't have a social security number, you're not gonna get employed, right? And so either apply for social security number and then look for employment. And FICA deductions, there shouldn't be any FICA deductions if you're a non-resident alien for federal tax purposes. So I'm going to try to answer a couple more questions. In the meantime, feel free to take a screenshot of this page. It has our number, it has our email. feel free to contact us directly on the email in case I'm not able to answer answer all the questions. But so this is an interesting question. Shirish has asked, my tax state is Illinois and I live in Massachusetts and I'm working remotely here. Do I have to pay taxes in both the states? Technically, I'm working in Illinois. So usually personal services are taxed from where they're rendered from. Can I ask everyone to mute themselves because I can hear some background noise? So would request people to mute themselves for now, and then let me answer a couple more questions. Usually, you are taxed in the state where you're providing those services from, so you should be paying taxes in Massachusetts. But some states do have non-resident taxes. So if your employer is based there, you might have to pay taxes there as well. So again, you might have to consult with an expert on what's the best way to deal with this. You might have to file two returns again. You got to avoid those double taxation. You don't want to pay taxes in two different states, right? So if a state return is required in Illinois and if they're withholding taxes in Illinois, that's perfect. And then you only pay taxes in Massachusetts if you have Massachusetts income. But if you're working remotely from Massachusetts, there's a high chance Massachusetts will tax you for that as well. But you'll get deductions because you have already paid taxes in Illinois. So you won't get double taxed, but you got to file your tax returns correctly. And then I've just entered the US in Jan and have an on-campus job. Hirsch, congrats on the on-campus job, but you don't have to worry about taxes right now. No taxes for you. Like this year, you'll be filing your taxes in 2023 because this is your income that you earned in 2022. So your 2022 tax return is going to be filed next year. So don't worry about it. Just make sure your employer is not withholding your Social Security, FICA, Medicare taxes. Just reach out to them, and make sure they're not withholding that. What time of the year should we file taxes? Deadline is April 15th, April 18th actually this year. So before that. And then does the rent in Massachusetts include if we are on a lease and paying our monthly rent? Yes. If you're on a lease, you're paying your rent. Yes. That counts towards that deduction. So you can claim that deduction as well. Just put it on the return. Make sure you're getting that $3,000 deduction. And that should be it. And yeah, correct. You don't have to include your tuition statement if you're a non-resident. You don't have any tuition credits. I'm not on health insurance plan for like 2 months. Will that be a problem for taxes or visa filing in the future? This is where it's a gray area. I don't want to get into details about this, but but I'm going to talk from the legal standpoint. Massachusetts basically requires you to have health insurance. I'm just going to leave it there. So just get your health insurance quickly, and it shouldn't be a problem. But if you're not on, if you don't have health insurance, that could be a problem in the future. So yeah, you should have health insurance. I mean, you're away from home, and things could happen, and you want to have health insurance definitely in a foreign country. And let's see a couple of other questions. After I upload all my documents on your portal, will I get a chance to talk to you before filing? Yes, you will. Just to make sure I have everything covered, student loan credits, other credits. Yes, Suresh, you definitely will have the opportunity to talk to me, to talk to one of the members in our team, but I'll be the one signing off on your return. So, rest assured, your return, like you'll definitely get to talk to me if you file with us. On-campus job doesn't require a social security number. Okay, right, Rajat, I think that might not be accurate. Actually, I'm not sure. So, maybe you're right. But like, I'm from Northeastern. Again, people who just joined in, I went to Northeastern as well. I think I required a social security number when I worked on campus because I mean they gotta withhold your taxes. It's legally required for them to withhold taxes. So I don't think you can work without a social security number. But I could be wrong. Let's see, a couple other questions. Is it possible? I have a US citizen child. I did receive the child tax credit payment. Do I include this in income this year? Okay, Edgar, this is important. So email me, write down my email on the screen. Child tax, they have child tax credits. That's like a whole another topic. In 2021 was crazy with advanced tax credit payments and stuff. So let's get in touch after this call and let's see. When we file taxes, do we get a refund on state taxes as well? That's a very good question. We've discussed a standard deduction for federal taxes, which is 12,550. So anything that you make under that, Indian student, you get that standard deduction because of that special treaty article, right? But what happens with the state? Massachusetts also provides you with a certain amount of deduction. In fact, a lot of states do. So yes, so for federal, it might be 12, it is 12,000. But for state, that could be a different amount. So for a state, it could be $5,000 of deductions, which means if you earn $7,000, you don't have to pay any taxes on the federal side because that is all exempt. But the state is only allowing $5,000 in deduction, right? So that $2,000, the remaining will need to be taxed. But guess what? Whoever paid you that 7K has already withheld Massachusetts taxes, right, from your paycheck. So now might as well file the return and get that refund. We only need to pay for that extra $2,000 in of income, and that's already withheld from your taxes. So you'll definitely get a refund from your state as well. Question, I'm on F1 OPT and my spouse is on H1B. Should we file jointly for taxation or should we file separately? We covered this topic, and this is the exact exemption that I was talking about. If you're on F1 OPT and if you've been in the US for less than 5 years, Priyank, if you've been in the US for less than 5 years, and your spouse is on H1B, you're non-resident, she's a resident. Legally, non-residents cannot file married filing joint, but since your spouse is a resident, if she's on H1B and if she meets the substantial presence test, which means she's in the country for more than 183 days, you can file a married filing joint return. There's a special election 6013G, 6013H, one of these two elections that you can make and treat yourself as a resident and then file that return. So that is a we have to file additional paperwork with the return and other statement claiming that, I'm claiming this election where my wife is a resident, so I want to be treated as a resident. So just make sure, we do that correctly, and then you should be all good with filing a married filing joint return. So that's possible. So this is the deduction that I was talking about. Election that I was talking about. And then let's see. Think that were all the questions here. So I'm gonna another question. In case no income, do you still file a 1040 NR or any other form? That's a very quick question. I'm so sorry I forgot to include this. But yes, this is another big one. If you don't have any income, there is a form called 8843. So form 8843 is required to be filed by non-residents without the 1040 NR. So it's basically just a blank form that says that you're an exempt individual and all of that stuff. It's just to maintain your status. So it will be good if you file that. I don't know. You don't have any income. You don't have anything. I don't know how IRS is tracking this, but that's one form that you can file. So basically 8843, it's a very simple form. You can file it on your own. Just go to Google, type form 8843, open that form, and then you open the 8843 instructions. Just view the instructions, enter everything in 8843 and mail it out. It will have an address there. So just mail it out. So whoever asked this question, great question. And yeah, that's it. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up. If you have any other questions,
Hello.
please email.
Hey,
Yes.
Yeah,
just
I
a
have
quick
one
question.
before
So
you
if I
leave.
am like,
Okay, so let's
yeah,
go with Venkata. One at a
yeah,
time. I'm only gonna take 3 questions, so it's time to wrap it up. Yeah,
yeah.
Venkata.
So if I'm like not on lease, is the rent still tax deductible? Like, do I have to show any pay stubs or any pay slips or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're paying even if you're not on the lease, I mean, I understand your situation. You might not be on the lease, but you might be paying someone who's on the lease, right? So like, you have your
Yeah,
bank account statements to prove that money is going out every month to this guy for rent, right? And he's on the lease. So if you're there temporarily and he's charging you for that, you're basically paying rent. I'm not gonna quote you on this, but don't quote me on this, but that rent might or might not be deductible. But yeah, I think you should be good with that if you're not on the lease, but you have something to prove that you're paying rent, because you're sharing rooms and whatnot, shared spaces. So I'm gonna leave it there.
Okay. So does like IRS like verify student loan interest deduct, like does it have a, like, my question being, how does IRS verify student loan interest deductible, like when interests are paid for the banks which are like
They're not,
overseas, like
I
if a
mean,
bank loan is
they're
back
not
home in
checking
India?
your rent, they're not checking anything. But say if your return gets audited, if you file an incorrect return in the future, if you do get audited, they're gonna want to look at all the documents, right? And even for your student loan interest, there's a way. I mean, like I said, you can reach out to your bank, you can reach out to your financial institution, request the documents from them, right? Principal and interest payments, and that's how we calculate interest deduction. So
Yeah, so I don't have to like upload any documents,
it doesn't. Yeah,
interest documents from the banks overseas, right? While
exactly. It
filing
doesn't.
taxes.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't
Yeah.
go with the tax return, but as a preparer, I would like to see that document, because I cannot, I would like to see that document before we put any interest deduction amounts there. So, anyways, I'm gonna.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I
Appreciate
just
that.
have one more question before you leave.
Yeah. Last
Yeah,
question.
it's
After that,
regarding.
all the questions are welcome on the email. So I'm not gonna. This is the last one. Harshita, let's go.
Yeah, it's regarding the 1099 HC form. So suppose I have an insurance from Northeastern University, and how like filing for this, how is it going to help me? Is it going to give me a refund, or what is it?
Massachusetts is a state that requires you to have health insurance. As simple as that. So this is basically just a form that says that you had health insurance. As simple as that. So it's a 1099 HC. HC stands for healthcare. You're probably on Blue Cross Blue Shield, I'm assuming, with Northeastern. So they should, you'll get a 1099 HC. We put that on your Massachusetts return. All of that information goes with your return because, again, healthcare is important and I think mandatory in Mass. So this is why there is special form that goes along with your federal return to show that you had health insurance, which means you check the boxes like what months you had health insurance, what was your policy number, all of that stuff. So everyone living in Massachusetts, you should be receiving a 1099 HC. Contact your health insurance company; they will provide it to you.
So there are no tax returns as such on this or something, right?
Sorry?
There are no tax returns or anything as such on this.
There's no refund, but if you don't include that, there might be a penalty. So you won't get a refund for having health insurance, but you might get penalized if you don't. So which is why it's mandatory, which is why they have that form in the first place in the Massachusetts state return. So
you have to accompany this form with what, like while submitting what, where do you have to put this form with?
So that information goes along with the Massachusetts state return. So Massachusetts it has a couple of forms that we have to file, and one of the forms is where you indicate that you have health insurance, that the taxpayer has health insurance. So as simple as that. But anyways, so I'm gonna wrap it up now. Any more questions? Happy to answer them on email. And when you're ready to file your taxes, you can go to my website, click on login, and complete your tax application. And I'll be more than happy to help you guys. Hopefully, you guys learned a little bit from the session, and thank you so much for attending. Thanks, guys.
Haven't done my taxes, I'm too turned up. Haven't done my taxes, I'm too turned up.